All right, we are here. Welcome everybody as you're coming in. And we're here with Melinda Peterson.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Welcome.
And as you come in, feel free in the chat to introduce yourself. Tell us where you are in the world. You can share your name if you want to. You can share if you're a provider or parent or both. So welcome, welcome. And good morning to you if you are on the West Coast. Good afternoon if you're elsewhere in the world. And we're gathered here to understand the challenges in receiving healthcare after loss, which is just a super important topic. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Caton, and I work with Return to Zero. I am both a community support coordinator as well as a virtual support group facilitator. And I met Melinda back in 2015 at my first Return to Zero retreat. And so it is an honor to sit here in this space with you again, Melinda. I live in the Seattle area and used to live in Los Angeles. I have had 2 full-term births, 2 second trimester losses, and 2 early miscarriages. And one of those full-term births was ended in my daughter, who is 5 now. So that's a little bit of background about me and working with Return to Zero. So Melinda is here, and she is also a bereaved mama. She's also a registered nurse, board certified holistic nurse and wellness coach. And she lost her son, Oak, and ability to carry another child, and nearly lost her life in 2014. She has gone on to serve as the board chair for Return to Zero and now serves as Board Emeritus. And her business is called Scarlit Coaching and provides coaching support, workshops, and tools related to healthcare anxiety and ways we can find wellness throughout transcendence in health and recognizing that you are seen, that you are heard and validated in your body's way as being of pure love, as a being of pure love. So I turn this over to Melinda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jen. And I remember meeting you at Woodby, and what an honor it was. And boy, have we come a long way thanks to this organization. So I am just really honored to be here. I'm honored to work with this organization in many capacities, and I'm honored to serve everyone who's here live and will view the recording in the future. This is a topic that's very passionate for me, and because I have experienced it myself, both as a patient in the healthcare world and as a nurse on the other side. And so I feel like I can offer some of that duality in what I see and what I experience and in my expertise. So I'm really honored to be here, and thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so as we know the topic, Jen so wonderfully shared, I do offer conversation or questions in the chat. Jen offered to take those down and as we go along, so if something comes up and it's top of mind, go ahead and record it in the chat so that she can offer it to me as a question after we're done, because otherwise you might forget, right? So just go ahead when it comes up, or if you have a point or an aha moment, I would love to hear those as well. So thanks for being here. Again, my name is Melinda Peterson. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and let's get started. So my intention for today is for this to be a safe and inclusive presentation. And if at any moment you need to leave, take a breath. And if there's any challenges or comments that you want to make about in our intention for being inclusive, anything you want to feedback you want to offer me, I welcome that as well. I am going to share one picture of my situation from when I lost my son Oak. It does have medical images in it, so if that is something that you're not quite ready for. It's the third slide, so you can go ahead and just, maybe move away from your computer, come back. That's up to you. So a little bit about me. So when I was a little girl, man, I loved my stuffed animals, as you can see here, the 80s wallpaper, stuffed animals. Like, I loved stuffed animals. I loved books. I loved anything that I could carry with my hands, right? And over time, I started to notice, like, these hands, like, bring me closer to my stuffed animals. They bring me my books. They can do all these things for me. Like, these hands are, like, incredible. What are these things? Like, and if I am capable of doing these things that I enjoy with my hands, like, what else is my body capable of doing, right? Like, what else am I capable of doing? And I started to have this, like, awakening of, like, wow, this is so cool. Like, all these things I can move and run and carry and do with my body. And then being a woman in this world, we were told many stories over time, right, about our body having to look a certain way, having to feel a certain way, having to act a certain way. And if it didn't, it wasn't worthy, right? And so those stories started to compound. They started to become part of my own narrative. And they started to just really disconnect me from my body and from that awe that I experienced as a little girl and from that possibility that I experienced as a little girl, right? And it wasn't until I lost Oak, nearly lost my life, and had a near-death experience where we had a shared transformational death experience, Oak and I. And there were many strong messages. Of course, the first one being love and ultimate love, and that Oak was safe in this experience, and I was safe in this experience. And another one of those messages, though, that applies to this this work that I do now, was that the wisdom is in the body, right? So we have this body experience that we're having on this planet, right? And the wisdom is in it. The wisdom is in the way that we work and we heal. And that transformed when I came back to my body and I started to recognize that and started to learn about it. I became a nurse and I got really interested in not only taking care of people in the hospital, which I did for many years, but also, like, what else can I do for people so that we can understand our bodies better, we can be better self-advocates. And that includes those of us who have gone through loss, right? Because it's really, really tough after we've gone through something so traumatic as loss to be good self-advocates for our body. And so that's what changed me. That's the transformational point that got me into this work. And I love doing this. And my goal for everyone is to feel seen, heard, and validated in their body's way. And so that they can understand themselves, they can understand their needs, and then they can communicate them and get those taken care of so they can feel well inside their body and enjoy the day-to-day, right? Here's the image of Oak. This was the situation that we were in. That's my sweet boy. I'm unable to carry another. So we are currently in an international adoption, as a way to grow our family. All right, so the agenda for today is to acknowledge. So we want to acknowledge the problem, right? We want to validate our responses to it, right? And I think I suggested in the bio that it was normal, right? We want to validate this. This is real. This is normal. It's very real for us. You would almost ask yourself, how could you not have a response to healthcare, and how could you not have challenges in healthcare after going through such a profound loss, right? Or losses. Some of our common triggers that we have in healthcare settings, and then some guidance on how to move through and some opportunities for ongoing support. So I would love to ask to the group, and you can share in the chat if you feel welcome, what are some of your fears around healthcare? And I say this very broadly. This can be anything from even going to the chiropractor, going to the dentist, going to, your primary care is what most people think of, right? But really anything that's healthcare related, getting a laboratory test done, right? What are some of your fears around it, and how have they changed for you after loss or your losses? And if you want to share in the chat, that's great. See if I can see the chat. All right. Well, you can also, if you're not comfortable with sharing too, you can also just kind of put those in the back of your mind and think about it as we move through today, so that you can start to understand how you might develop a response to it. So returning to healthcare is one of the toughest things that we can do after it was the setting for our darkest moments, right? And it profoundly separated from us from our bodies, right? And that can be whether you're a birthing parent or whether you're not, right? It still has this separation of us from understanding what we thought we knew, right, about our bodies and how these things came to be, right? How our babies came to be. So we know losing a baby is a profound and often disenfranchised loss, meaning it's often not really understood, not really recognized. Healthcare settings need to do a better job of providing the safe space for lost parents. And as lost parents, we bring our unknown and known fears, judgments, feelings of powerlessness into these settings. And both of these challenges together can make it really hard for us to receive the care that we deserve. And while it takes time and effort to change the healthcare system, we hope to, right? And we're doing a lot of work around that with RTZ. We really want to focus on us, right? What can we do to acknowledge, validate, understand, and guide through these challenges so that we can offer a path forward so that you can receive the care that you deserve. And the ways that our healthcare system currently acknowledges experience, and now there's a wide range, right? We talked about a wide range of, whether you're going to a naturopath or a doctor, there's always a wide range, but there is a focus kind of on these three main things in general, right? Your medical history, your family medical history, and then what's currently going on. And that's usually the primary focus, right? We on the healthcare side are limited by things like time, right? And so we try to get straight to the point, and we sometimes miss, right, the really important things, which are the grief and loss that you're experiencing. And we think of that as an afterthought, that mind spirit piece, right? And when mental health is addressed, it's usually, and I don't know if some of you have had this experience when you've gone into, just as for an example, your primary care provider, right? They give you this, are you feeling anxious, like 1 to 10, 10 being the most anxious, 1 being not anxious at all. Well, we all know if we're in a healthcare setting and we're feeling at a 10, that might be very different tomorrow. That might be very different on Friday. And so we're in there kind of going, I don't know how to answer this, right? Because average or today or, and then of course the answer that you give can make a profound impact on the kind of care that you receive, right? So it's one of these things that can almost create more anxiety in us, because it's like on the moment we're making a judgment call on something that's very subjective. We're making an objective judgment call on something that's very subjective. And even if there's a trauma, even if there's a medical trauma, a lot of times I know in my experience, it's sort of like, oh, that happened to you? Oh, that's terrible. Okay, we're moving on now, right? Even as a nurse, that stuff happens to me, right? And additionally, grief is carried in the body. We carry it in the body, and sometimes providers in the medical field struggle to find the source of some of these issues, right? They struggle with maybe some test results are all normal, but for you, you're still experiencing these issues, fatigue and headaches and sensitivity to noise, maybe heart palpitations. You're still experiencing these things, but there's kind of nothing they can do for you because, or at least they think, right? Because they think that all your test results are normal, and that can feel really, that can make us not want to seek healthcare because we feel like they can't really help us, right? And so that's like the struggle on both sides, right? Is that on their side, if all your test results are normal, nothing's really showing up, it's sort of like it's beyond their capabilities. And then on your side, you're going, well, I need help. I'm experiencing these things and I want to feel better, right? So these are some of these challenges that we all experience. And there are biases in healthcare, and there are some wonderful presentations already that RTZ has brought in some really, really wonderful experts on this. So I'm not going to go into this in a whole lot of detail, but I just want to acknowledge that we have a history, right, with healthcare, especially for people of color, women, people with disabilities, and things that were done to them without consent, resulting in a collective trauma, whether or not, it happened to you in your lifetime, your ancestor, that trauma is passed down, right? And that needs to be openly acknowledged. And in addition, we have our own biases too, and we have our own fears and stories. And what matters really is that we're aware of them and we openly talk about them. So it's important to kind of notice these things as we move through. And again, there are some other wonderful webinars on this. So this is just really quick summary, but here are some of the biases and the inconsistencies in treatment that we see. Just a couple of things I want to point out here is that the psychosocial biases can be anything from people who are speaking English as a second language, all the way to education status, dress, and these things like, of course, if we all knew better, right, that we were doing these things, and if we were able to acknowledge and be aware of them, then we could change them. And sometimes they're so unfortunately subconscious that they happen. And now that we're starting to talk about it more, we can start to do something about it, but it's going to take some time. And the other thing I want to point out too is that with gender and BIPOC biases, some of those are the same. However, BIPOC biases are compounded. For people of color, they're compounded. And there's a lot of expectations too around fertility and our desires around fertility, and also depending on what state you're in, your legal issues around fertility, right? And so all of these things, right, matter when we think about the whole healthcare piece. And then if you are in the healthcare field, if you are a nurse, if you are a doctor, if you are an ultrasound technologist, you might receive preferential treatment, right? Or you might receive a lack of explanation or care because there are assumptions made about your knowledge, right? So some of our responses in the healthcare field, in the healthcare settings as a patient, right? So our responses are a mixture really of our previous experiences with healthcare, and this is before really our losses, right? Anything from positive experiences of receiving a lollipop after you get your first vaccine, right? All the way to how maybe your caregivers responded about you receiving healthcare and their anxieties and you feeling that and not being clear on what is comfortable, right? What is safe. Any of those experiences, right, really build into how we as an individual experience healthcare. And then, of course, there's the loss or losses. And those have the profound impact of creating that before and that after for us. And so no matter what, there's that pivotal moment when things change, right? And sometimes we don't know exactly what has changed. We just know that things have changed, right? And then there's the care that we receive during and after loss. And this can be, even if the care is kind of by the book, right? Or things that we recommend, I guess I shouldn't say by the book, but things that we recommend as part of RTZ, things like having time with your baby if you have that ability, or, photographs, things like those that even if those things happen, right, there's still this profound change in that experience. We're not used to it. It's not something that we're as familiar with until it happens, right? I mean, nobody really understands it until it happens to them. And so that care that we receive, or, of course, it can be very poor too in some cases, and all of that, right, compounds. Like, so these three things really matter on the picture of where we are today and how we relate to healthcare. Additionally, we can become really disconnected from our body, and this is due to the trauma of losing a baby, right? And this disconnection there are a lot of studies that show that the more that we avoid care for ourselves, and again, that's broad care, any kind of care, looking at our what is, just taking care of ourselves, and especially if there's something that we think is wrong, avoiding that care just can make this separation further, because we start to like listen to our body less. We start to understand our body less. And so actually like avoiding the care, avoiding, making that appointment, avoiding going, all those things can make it harder for us to get reconnected to our body. And some of the ways that this disconnection can feel like are feeling pain more strongly. Oh, maybe you stub your toe and it just aches for hours afterwards, and it never did before, right? Or we feel no pain at all. Having trouble listening to or retaining information, sometimes called grief brain, right? Maybe we do actually go to our healthcare provider and we remember nothing of what was said, and we just have trouble. Like we go into this fog place, right? While the person's talking to us, while the provider's talking to us. I know I've been there. I've been in like a complete fog, and I've gone home and gone, I don't remember any of this. And they've given me written materials and I'm not interested in reading it. It happens. Avoiding nagging symptoms. Maybe you are, out on a run for your baby, or doing something that really, really makes you happy and connects you to your child, right? And your ankle's bothering you and you just, I'll get to it later. Or maybe it'll fix itself, or I don't know, it keeps bothering me, and now it's becoming lower back pain, and now all these things are happening, right? And things are connecting, and you're just going, I'll get to it later. I'm avoiding it, right? That avoidance of your own body is a disconnection. Prioritizing someone else's wellness above your own. This is huge in the loss community. It's huge in general, but it's huge in the loss community. Maybe you have living children, or your partner, or somebody that you're prioritizing their wellness. You want to make sure they get taken care of, but you haven't been taken care of in years, right? And unfortunately, what I have come to notice with my clients and with my patients is that a lot of this comes from the inability to care for our baby that we lost. So that connection is there. It's like we want to do something for somebody else because we wanted to do that thing for our baby. And then, of course, turning toward unhealthy habits, drugs, alcohol, anything that kind of removes us further from our body. This is something that will start to, when we feel disconnected, those things might seem more appealing to us, and they might start to further disconnect us from seeking the care that we need. So some common triggers in healthcare settings. First, there's the settings themselves, right? There's the hospitals, there's OBGYN, laboratories, ultrasound. For me, it was dental clinics. I was not interested at all in going to the dentist. It took me 6 years after my loss to go back to the dentist. And for me, it was something about the mouth. And I eventually found out and attributed that through therapy and other work that I was doing, that it was about finding my voice in my loss, because I was unable to speak when I lost Oak because of the breathing tube, and I was unable to really find my voice for a while I was healing afterwards. It was more about, and then of course I didn't have any say, right, in my loss. I didn't have any say in losing my ability to have more children. And so for me, the mouth was really a sacred place, and I didn't want anybody near my mouth because I didn't want to lose my voice again. So it might be these things for you. It also might be something else. Other common triggers actually inside of these settings, right? Sounds, shoes on tile, equipment, clicking of the computer. Scents. For me, it was the hand soap. The hand soap so the hospital I was at and the entire clinic system Used the same soap for years. They didn't change it out until I think like 2017 or something. And every time I would go and I'd wash my hands, I would just be instantly transported back to Losing Oak, because I would smell that soap every time somebody came in and washed their hands, every time I washed my hands, every time, it it didn't matter whether it was a day after or it was 2017. Like I was instantly transported by that smell. Cleaning solutions, laundry detergent, right? Intake questions, this is a big one. Last menstrual period, right? How many children do you have? Well, and then the questions about have you had miscarriages? All those questions, right? They're tough. They're really tough for lost parents. And for me, with the last menstrual period, I had to really advocate for myself that I will no longer be asked that question. And we're going to get into that in a little bit and how I did that. Staff, whether or not they were involved in your care, you might see a brand new doctor and be in a brand new place, and you're just getting this feeling of dread about, or memories of your loss, and it's nothing against them. It's just sometimes you can't explain it, right? And so it's just knowing that and acknowledging that's what's happening will be helpful. Type of care, of course, right? Type of care. I'm not going to go through all these communication triggers just because they can be hard to hear, but here are some of the things that are said or asked of us that can be a real challenge for us. And I'm just going to let you read over those, but one of them I'm going to point out, a couple of them I'm going to point out. You're healing up nicely. Now that might sound like a good thing, right? To a person who hasn't been through loss, but a person who has been through loss, for us, that might sound really, at least for me, it sounded for me, it sounded sad, because it's like, well, if I'm healing up, I'm getting further and further away from my baby and from what happened, right? And I know that's not just my experience, but that is my experience as well. Like that, it was hard to hear that, which sounds like, why would that be hard to hear, right? To somebody who hasn't been through loss. It can be. And we need to explore what happened. That's a big one too, depending on especially for those who have been through multiple losses and they just feel like their body is giving up on them, or something is happening that can't be explained, right? This one can be really, really challenging to hear. So self-advocacy. So we're starting to get to the pathway forward. And something I want to say about self-advocacy is that most people think self-advocacy is like marching in there and saying like, this is what I need and this is who I am, and I'm going to just, transform everything about my care, and I'm going to go in there, blazing, like ready to go, right? And just ready to shout it from the rooftops. This is what I need. Or, maybe they think it's like somebody who's being really difficult, right, in a healthcare setting. Self-advocacy is so much, right? It's you can start. This is the pathway forward. Self-advocacy can start with just being curious about what your fears are and knowing those. That's it. It doesn't have anything to do with setting foot in a healthcare setting yet. Eventually, right? You get there, but it can just be about like naming those fears and going, I need to start working with someone to work through these fears, whether that's a therapist, whatever. So self-advocacy has a wide range of meaning. It's not just, kind of what we think of as typical, like I'm gonna go in there and get my thing done, right? So yeah, just a little further of the definition. It's more than asking for what you deserve. Of course, that's a huge part of it, right? That's the ultimate, that's what we want. We want to be able to ask for what we deserve. We want us to be able to create the setting that gives us that ability to get what we deserve. And it's also naming your fears, understanding what your body needs, getting reconnected to your body and what you need. So one of the things I hear consistently from my patients and my clients are, well, I don't want to ask for what I need. I feel like that's being difficult, right? This is something we commonly hear. I don't want to be that difficult patient. I don't want to be that difficult person. I'm just gonna go along with whatever they say and hang out because, you know, just be nice, right? And why do we do this? Why do we avoid asking for what we need? Why do we have this assumption of being difficult when we advocate for ourselves? So there's a lot on this slide, but I offer you to look at some of these things, some of these stories that we tell ourselves about why we don't advocate for ourselves, and just pick some of these and maybe write them down for yourself. And in the future, you can either journal about them or bring them to your therapist and say, oh, this is so me. This is so me. This is why I don't ask for what I need. This is why I don't care about what my body deserves. I want to work on this, right? So you can pull out any of these. There's some good ones here. And any of these can be worked on, can be moved through, right? And so it's just learning and starting. I was told to be nice. That's probably like the biggest one for me. I grew up in Minnesota, like Minnesota nice, right? Oh, you don't ask for what you need. You just go along with it. They're the experts, right? And I want to be liked. That's also a big one for me. And then, you know, after you have a loss, a lot of it is I'm scared. I'm scared to ask. I just don't even really know, right? So yeah, I just offer these to you. And if any of these like really resonate with you, write them down, journal about them, work on them with a trusted therapist or coach. And then this whole myth of being difficult is something that I hope as a healthcare provider, we can stop using this difficult patient, you know, unfortunately anybody else who's a provider knows that that's a myth based on bias a lot of times. Getting back to that idea of bias, like we don't know their situation. We're making assumptions about them. We're making assumptions about how they're going to receive care. Unless someone is harming others, it really, and even in that case, like that's a separate issue from labeling them. Labeling them is not going to help, right? But we have to address it, but that's a separate issue from labeling them, right? You are within your rights to advocate for yourself. And in fact, it actually helps not only you, but it helps us as the provider. Like if somebody tells me this is what my body needs, I know my body, and I can tell that this is what's happening right now. I listen to that because I know, like, again, I don't know you for more than, you know, maybe the 2 days we're together in the hospital. You've been with your body for years. Like, so for me, that's helpful as a nurse. And it's also helpful for you. So how do we create this bridge from stuck to self-advocacy? And this is such a common question, because when we're in a grief and loss, we were feeling stuck. We're like, well, yeah, this is all great and good. How do I get there? Like, how do I start to get there? And I did mention a little bit, it's about naming your fears. It's about understanding why we tell ourselves that we're so afraid of being difficult. It's just and really it's about getting curious about what we can do, right? What we can do. Maybe we can maybe we can't make the phone call to set the appointment up, but we can drive and go there. We just don't want to make that phone call. We just don't want to start that process. And so we ask someone we care about to do that for us, right? We start to get curious about what is it that we can do and what we can't do. And just start to ask that question, start to open that door, start to take a few steps forward toward away from stuck to self-advocacy. It has nothing to do with starting at 100%. We just start where we can, where we're at. And so here are some other ways. Here are 3 ways to really start building that self-advocacy within you. Bring a support companion. to your appointments. There's nothing wrong with that. You now, thankfully, that we're coming out of some of the cloud of COVID, right? You're allowed to bring a person with you. If you can't, right, there's always FaceTime or some other kind of video chat, right? But bring somebody with you who you know will not only listen to and retain information, maybe they can take notes for you. Maybe they can remember the questions that you wanted to ask, so you don't have to. Bring that person with you. There's nothing wrong with that, no matter whether you're 3 or whether you're 85, right? Create some statements or responses ahead of time that feel right to you. So for me, with the last menstrual period question, every time I got asked it, I burst into tears. It was really, really hard for me, and I avoided going to the doctor for that reason. And so I created a statement ahead of time that said, I would like for you to understand that asking that question is no longer medically indicated. And because of that, could you please remove it from my charts? And they did. It's no longer medically indicated. I don't have a uterus anymore, right? So I don't bleed anymore. So I had to write that statement down ahead of time. I had to practice it. I even brought it with me on a notepad so that I could say it. And it doesn't even have to be that. I mean, that's nurse language, right? But it doesn't even have to be that complicated. Create some of those statements ahead of time that feel right to you. And that way you can start this path, this bridge to self-advocacy. And again, like I mentioned before, get curious about what you can do, right? What can I do in this situation? Where can I start? And here's some further guidance that I offer. We're getting close to done here, so I'm just gonna take a breath before we get into this. Let everybody kind of sink in the information. Again, if you have questions, go ahead and write them in the chat. Statements, aha moments. I'd love to hear about them. So the first one is, know you are worthy. You are worthy. You are worthy of feeling well inside your body. You are worthy of having a healthy body. You are worthy. You are worthy of being well. And if you struggle with that, borrow my belief. I believe you're worthy. You can borrow my belief. You can just try it on and say, Melinda believes I'm worthy. I'm worthy. Until you can start to say, I am worthy. I am worthy of feeling well. I am worthy of receiving the care that I need. And then developing a ritual around it. So something that makes you feel worthy, whether it's empowering music or doing a stretch beforehand or something that really brings you back into your body. Nia is a great one. I know Betsy Winter offers that. Something that kind of brings you back into your body to help you remember that you are worthy no matter what happened. This was not your fault, right? And even if, I don't know, it doesn't matter. You're worthy. You're worthy, right? You're worthy. The second one is to name your fears and prepare how you want to feel. So a lot of us go into medical settings preparing for the outcome. Like, I need to go in because I need, an x-ray for my knee, and that's important, right? I offer that you prepare for how you want to feel, so that when you start to name it, like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get this x-ray for my knee, but I want to feel supported. I want to feel seen. I want to feel heard. I want to feel validated. I want to feel good afterwards. I want to feel like I can feel safe in the moment, right? So you start to prepare for how you want to feel. And explore what you fear and those triggers that we talked about in a safe situation with a coach or with a therapist. Start to look at some of those and just explore, get curious about what they might be for you and what they might mean for you. as far as what you're avoiding. And prepare again for how you want to feel. And that's like, it can be as simple as, I want to feel good. I want to feel settled in my body. I want to feel like I was a good listener, or I was, I want to feel like I can retain some of the information that we talked about today. Whatever it is, but how you want to feel. And then understanding your needs. This is the third one, really, really important. And this isn't just your symptoms, right? Bringing your list of symptoms, that's important. And we should bring a list of symptoms. But really, this is, again, getting reconnected to our body. And so moving some of that stuck energy. I mentioned Nia earlier. That's a great way to do it. Yoga, but hiking, anything that like kind of just moves through you, moves that stuck energy, brings you back into your body, gets you out of sometimes your head, right? Puts you back in your body, and you start to notice like what's happening. You start to create a story, and then you can start to create a story around what your body is experiencing. Now, this is different from like traditional healthcare, right? Traditional healthcare is like, we have a chart, and it's, does this person have X, Y, or Z? And they check the boxes, and, there's no story to it. There's no like, well, how did this come to be? Like, how does it make me feel? That, for like an example, like, I was told that I have high blood pressure, but for me, like, my story is that with my high blood pressure, I feel like I can still live my life, and I feel like I can manage this through these ways. And you start to like write a story, or sometimes people will create some art. If your body is feeling something like, I have pain in my knee, and this is, I was out hiking and I started to notice like I had pain in my knee, instead of just saying I have pain in my knee, because that can sound really dry, and it can sound like, for us who have experienced like loss, or who are working through getting the care that we deserve, it just can sound like this dry list of things that will, again, like start to disconnect ourselves from our body. But what is that story around what our body is experiencing? I was out hiking, and I like really enjoy the time to connect to my baby, but I started to feel this pain in my knee, and at first it was kind of on the left side of my knee, and then it kind of moved to the center. But I continued to hike anyway, because I really enjoyed the experience. It was a sunny day, and and you start to like unravel like these things that your body is experiencing without it being so dry. Right? And then, of course, to your appointments, bring a written or recorded. You can record through like a sound app, or if you don't like to write things down, of your needs and your symptoms, so that you don't forget. Breathe. Right. So I offer you to learn a breathing technique ahead of time. Bring it with you to your appointments, and honor what you need. Use these breathing techniques while you're there. They're going to be some of your best friends when you're in these moments, right? My favorite technique is 4-7-8. 4 to the count of inhale, hold for 7, exhale to the count of 8. That's the one that I use whenever I'm in these settings, and I feel like I notice I'm starting to feel disconnected from my body, and feel like I'm not where I want to be. I'm not listening, that kind of thing, right? Breathe. Advocate, advocate, advocate. I'm a big proponent of self-advocacy. Just reiterating that it helps both you and the provider, and it's just, sometimes it's just knowing yourself better, getting curious about what our fears are, getting curious about what our challenges are, right? And another way to advocate for yourself is to create some structure around it. Like, if you're feeling like you don't want to make that phone call to make your appointment, set a date and a reminder. Set a date on your phone and say, all right, by this date, I'm going to call. Like, I'm in my insurance, maybe it's the end of the year or something, and you're in your insurance, and you're at a point where you feel like, financially it makes sense. Set a date and reminder. And you'll say, okay, on this date, I'm going to make the phone call. I'm going to create some structure around it, right? So that it's not this like nebulous thing, like, oh, I need to call at some point. Yeah, I'll get to it, right? And then, getting back to those, naming your fears, working through them with somebody trusted. Listen actively and ask powerful questions. This is huge, right? Because you have, I like to say like that going to your doctor's appointment is like going to a job interview. You have like 5 minutes to make your case, right? And then they're going to either like be able to help you in this short amount of time or not, right? And I hate that that's the situation that we're in, but we are in that situation in a lot of ways, especially those of us who live in the US. I don't know where everyone's from, but so it's so important that we can really understand what's being told to us. And again, if we're not capable of doing that quite yet, our companion can. So repeat things back, get really curious in order to clarify. So they use a bunch of medical language you don't understand, and we'll say, okay, I heard you say, something about this organ, right? I'm really curious what exactly that meant. If you can break it down for me a little bit. Don't be afraid of that. I do that. I'm a nurse. I'm in the medical field. Like, I don't know everything. I am not a cardiologist, right? So I get curious. Like, a lot of times they'll come in and they'll say, X, Y, and Z, and all this, they'll use all this medical language for me. And I'm like, okay, I get it up until this point. And then I'm just really curious about what you meant about this last term that you used. Can you explain that a little bit more? That's totally fine. Like, that's exactly why you're there. That's exactly what you need, right? And then if there's a situation that you're up against that you feel, you start to feel like, oh, we're getting into unsafe territory for me, and I'm wondering if like there's something that I can offer that will change this. The question, how else might we, is helpful. So like, how else might we phrase that so that this can work really well for me and you, right? I mean, when they say like, how many kids do you have? And you're not really like, you're not at the point where you're comfortable saying like, I have one child, he's no longer with me, right? How else might we phrase that question so that it's safer for you and me? I don't really love that question. Can we say like, who makes up your family at home? Who makes up your family, right? There's so many opportunities, but how else might we is a great way to kind of like transition. Like, how else might we like work together? How else might we co-create together so that it's not like you're doing this wrong, right? It's like, how else might we like get curious about something that we can change so that we're both in a safer situation? And the seventh one is to intuit and trust yourself. And a lot of times when we've gone through loss, and I know this personally, we can feel like we're very separated from our intuition. We can feel like maybe our intuition's not exactly where it needs to be because I'm mired in grief right now, right? And that's normal, right? And so I offer an exercise that can really help get us back to our intuition, and that is called the SPARK method. So the SPARK method, and all you do have to do is remember the word spark, and maybe it'll spark something in you, pun intended. Maybe it'll spark something in you to remember like what it is, or the thing that stands out for you. But anytime you feel like you're starting to get pulled away from your intuition, you're like, I'm not really sure. Is my gut telling me this? Is my gut telling me that? And I don't know if I can trust it because I'm in my grief brain still, right? So the S is a signal or a song. So signals can be like looking for a sign from your baby, or a song that helps transition you. So like a song that will help move you from stuck to back to your intuition, like something grounding or something, or maybe something exhilarating, right? That will kind of bring you back to your intuition. A prayer, a phrase, or praise, and that can be really any of those things, right? A phrase, a mantra, something, I am worthy, I am worthy, I am worthy. All right, I'm feeling back in my body, I'm feeling back in my intuition. An action, literally jumping up and down, taking a walk, like saying, okay, I need a moment, I'm gonna go to the restroom and come back. That's taking a moment to just switch the situation up, to walk, to get back into your body and get back into your intuition. R is ground in reality. So some of us who have been through anxiety understand like you can ground to reality in the five senses, like something you smell, something you hear, something you taste, right? just to get you back into the moment. Like, okay, this is like, I'm feeling very out of my body right now. I'm feeling away from my intuition, grounding back. And then offering kindness toward yourself. And that can be as simple as, you made it this far. Like, pat on the back, you're doing it. Like, I'm really proud of you. I really honor where you're at right now. Oh, I'm so relieved you're here and we're getting the care that you deserve. Thank you. Thank you, Melinda. Thank you for being here. This is awesome. Right. And so I just offer that as one method to get back into your intuition, that anytime you feel like you're kind of starting to separate from your gut or not understanding which way it's going, because our intuition is so, so vitally important for us. And with that, I am all finished. I appreciate your time, your energy. Thank you so much for coming. Here's some ways to get in touch with me, and anybody who, I honor people from this organization so much that anybody is welcome to use the coupon code if they want to explore my services or get in touch with me, and we can start just talking about what you might need is totally welcome as well. And these are some of the ways you can reach me on social media. The top one with the owl is called Third Eye Library. And for those of you, it's a newer community. For those of you that connect to like mystical and the woo, there's all sorts of options for you on there. And I have a wellness room in there, but there's a lot like in mediumship and connecting to meditation and all sorts of communities on there as well. So anybody's interested in that, I can send them an invitation. But thank you so much. And I would love to hear any questions or comments. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Melinda. This is such an important topic because so many of us are found stunned, don't know what to say. So in the chat, there was a lot of common things said about, you know, how do we respond to those certain questions, which I think you addressed in the like, how about how can we rephrase this? How can we work together? And you know, the fear of showing up with anxiety, which is unresolved trauma, can show up, PTSD, and then getting written off for having anxiety, you know, rather than a true medical concern. That has come up in the chat. Do you want to address that one?
Yeah, is there something, there's a lot of things there. Is there something specific? Like, was there anything that, or you want to start somewhere?
Trigger question, how many children do you have even after 4 years? You know, like just not knowing how to answer those things.
Yeah, I think for that, I know I have personally struggled a lot about how I want to answer that, and it's so individual, right? Some people have no problem saying like, I have 3 living children and I have 3 who are not with me anymore. Some people have really struggled with that, myself included. I really struggled with saying I have 1 child, but he's not, you know, he's not with me, but we're spiritually connected, right? For me, it really depends on the moment. If you're in a medical setting and you feel like it's, you know, a question that's applicable to maybe like your actual medical situation, you probably do need to answer like, yes, you know, I've had losses, you know, and I've had this. If you're in a situation where it's sort of like, you know, you're in a laboratory and they're trying to make chit chat with you, you know, sometimes I will say like, well, I have a family and I honor all the people who are in my family. So that includes like my dog, and that includes like my partner, and that includes like my living, well, I currently don't have any living children, but my child who's no longer with me. Like I like to include everybody who's in my family. I don't like to be exclusive of anyone. So like I'll say that sometimes, and people are usually like, okay. So it doesn't like put this onus on them, like I had this loss, and then the whole conversation, and then you get that whoa moment where everything changes, and then they feel bad, and then they apologize, and it feels so awkward, and you end up feeling awkward, and you're like, why do I feel awkward, right? Because they're uncomfortable, which is totally
guilty. We're guilty. Yeah, because we answer differently than we truly feel when we're at home, calm. So yeah, if guilt moves in, I highly recommend also just self-compassion, which I'm sure you
Absolutely.
agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. And however you answer it isn't wrong. Like, it isn't. Like, even if you're just not feeling up to talking about the children that you've lost, there's nothing wrong with that. Your children are with you all the time. They're with you in your heart, and they're with you in whatever way that you identify them as with you. Um, they're not going to be offended. They know that you care about them. They know that you love them. So even if you're not feeling up to talking about that at that very moment, because it's just this brief conversation where you know you're never going to see that person again and you just don't feel like going there, completely fine.
Another question is, how do you find the right provider who can be that person to you? Are there types of questions to elicit whether the provider is going to be that person? How do you find out? How do you shop around? Which in itself, personally, I've had 5 providers in 6 pregnancies, so I understand this question very well. Yeah, how do you want to address that? Like finding the right fit?
Yeah, yeah. This is such an important thing, and I think, and it has been for me as well. And it's a combination, right, of like your insurance. And so sometimes you're limited, right, by your insurance. And so you go through this giant list of all the providers on your insurance and who's in your network. And you go, "Oh, this is just a picture and a bio of where they went to school, right? Like, how the heck am I going to know any of this, right?" Um, and so it starts to become this is how I did it originally. Unfortunately, this is not like the greatest way to do it, but I'm just being honest because you guys, I appreciate vulnerability. The very first way I did it is I looked for who didn't put in their bio that they go hiking every weekend with their 3 kids. And if they didn't mention kids, I was like, I'm all in for that provider, right? I don't recommend that, okay? But I'm just being honest that we do what we have to do sometimes, right? Um, when you start to notice things, there are a couple different ways. If we're talking about like primary care, there's a lot of different types of providers. Like there's like medical doctors. It's like a whole nother conversation on its own. But there's medical doctors, there's nurse practitioners, there's physician assistants, there's all these different types. There's naturopath doctors, DOs, and it's sort of like getting to know how they come forward for their patients and whether or not they value. And it's not to say that medical doctors, for example, I'm just using this as an example, it's not to say that medical doctors don't value that. Sometimes like a nurse practitioner, and this is a general thing, right? I'm being very generic here, but sometimes a nurse practitioner who has had more experience with a lot of things in the hospital, who have seen a lot of things, have a little bit more compassion. Sometimes they don't. So it's really just starting to uncover like, okay, what do I need, right? What do I need? Like, what am I seeking? And then you start to notice, like, okay, do I feel comfortable with certain genders? Like, and unfortunately, like there is some of that bias that we bring to it again too. But you have to meet yourself where you're at. Do I feel more comfortable with people who talk about their children or don't talk about their children in their bio? Do I feel comfortable? Can I call ahead of time and ask them if they have any experience with grief and loss? Yes, all those things, yes, are possible. And I know that some of them, you can look at the reviews, but reviews are like, I'm going way long because this is a big topic. With the reviews, I just want everyone to understand that the people who do the reviews are the people that are way happy or the people that are way upset, right? And there's usually no like in the middle. So the reviews I don't really give a whole lot of weight to, but I think that it's important. Anytime that you're seeking somebody, you're interviewing them just as much as they're getting to know you. And so even if you're at the actual appointment and you're like, I feel like this person's great, I've heard lots of things from other people, they've been good for this person, and I'm here and I'm ready, and they show up in a way that doesn't feel right for you, there's no reason for you to stay. There's no reason for you to stay and put yourself through that. And I know, yeah, like Jen shared, what was something that you did when you started to find your 5 providers, right? What was something that like finally made you kind of say, I can settle? Do you remember?
I have a very unique situation, but you know, the providers I found before the doctor that solved my blood clotting issue, they were fine. They were okay providers. There was nothing wrong with them. But I was searching for answers to why I was having multiple losses. And so I ended up going through a naturopathic fertility doctor to a perinatologist who specializes in testing above and beyond what the Board of Obstetrics recommends, and found that I had a high factor VIII. So I had some underlying issues that unfortunately I had to experience 4 losses before finding the right person. So, but in that provider, he was very confident. I want someone who's confident in their ability to take care of me, because that helped me relieve my anxiety through a pregnancy. I still had the anxiety, of course, after loss, but he really was so confident in what my body could do, what he knew. And so that really helped a lot. Someone who's willing to take the time, more than 5 minutes, to sit with you, and someone who's not talking, someone who's listening with compassion, and who's actually addressing your questions and seeing beyond your anxiety, beyond your trauma responses. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And there were 2 things that really came up for me, I think, with what you said. One was that you went kind of outside of the traditional scope of what you thought you needed with addressing the naturopath. And I think that's something that is really important, that if we have the resources to do so, we can kind of diversify away from what we think is like traditional, treatment, or we can have one who's, like a traditional medical doctor, and another who like tends to think a little bit more outside the box, like more holistically. And the second thing I love that you said, Jen, was, and I think is important to mention, is that you felt really like you were seen and heard from him being very confident. And I know, like, for me, that's not like if somebody comes across as very confident, like I might start to feel like, maybe that they're too confident, or, it's kind of like a fine line for me. I'm more of the I think confident in their abilities, like you shared. I think that's important. But I know sometimes like we feel like if for some of us, like if there's too much confidence, it can come off as like, they're, they're not listening, or they're not like, they're, I don't know, what's the word? Like, so for some of us, it doesn't work, right? Because we start to feel like if they're so confident, then like, are they really like paying attention to what I'm doing, or who I am as a unique individual, instead of like, so it's really about knowing like what you need. And I think I honor like totally what you said, Jen, about just like knowing like, okay, this is what I need. This is how I'm gonna keep searching. And it really doesn't start with the person themselves. It really starts with you, and like understanding your situation in the now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And go with feelings. How do you feel in a setting? How do you feel in the hospital? How do you feel in that medical setting? Whether it is acupuncture, naturopath, it doesn't matter what doorway you walk through, but feeling comfortable, feeling safe. Do you feel good and held? Okay, so the last 2 things were, is there a resource we can share with medical provider after a loss? And I think on the Return to Zero website, we do have a link that we can, that you can look for on what to say to providers, I believe. So maybe look for that on our website. And then the last thing was just those triggers that come up. So even an ultrasound on a different body part is a trigger for someone here in the chat, and medical bills coming in, and any appeals, and really dealing with the business of our loss is really a cruel thing to have to deal with. So yeah.
Absolutely. I know. I wish I had a solution to that.
Yeah. I say just delegate if you can get help from a partner or from a family member to help you with that stuff. And then how trauma shows up, it's stored in the body. So of course, an ultrasound or a hand soap is going to be a trigger. So addressing the trauma physically, moving your body, somatic experiencing, whatever it is for you, to help move that trauma through, because it's looking to finish its cycle. It got stuck in the nervous system. And that is, yeah, that's something we talk a lot about at Return to Zero. Just how do we address the trauma that's underlying all of this stuff? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Knowing it, naming it, and feeling it, moving it. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your questions, your insight. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your stories, especially those who are really far out and still having these symptoms. And I saw someone who was 40 years out from a loss, and how there was not support back then. And I still am amazed how much support there is today compared to back then. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melinda. And when I end this, we will be gone, and take care.
Thanks, everybody.